Now, other terms that you'll see in the book and what we discussed in class is you'll see that we talked about this idea of equilibration or creating disequilibrium. Okay, what is equilibration? Equilibration is the idea of going in and out of equilibrium. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, when you have a full grasp of the content of what the teacher's talking about, the problems that you're doing, you're in a state of equilibrium. Everything adds up. Makes total sense. I can solve the problem with what I already know. Everything's fine. Well, what happens when the teacher throws a little curve? Suddenly you're conjugating verbs from Spanish. You guys have done this 100 times, for those of you who taken Spanish. You're going from the as to amos, the we. You guys have done it, right? Conjugating verbs. So you go from hablar, okay, and you work through this. And you know how to do it again and again and again. Then suddenly the teacher throws a curve at you, and you get an irregular verb. You get this irregular verb, and you go to apply it, and the teacher's like, whoa, 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 you can't do that. It's not a regular verb, it's irregular, you have to do something different. It's this. It's like, oh, crap. That doesn't follow the same line of reasoning. So now you have to create a new scheme, or you got to think a little bit differently about conjugating a verb that you didn't have to do before. Okay, that's a modification. That's an accommodation. Well, what happened is the teacher asked you to solve this problem, and you naturally went to what you've learned, how to conjugate a verb. And suddenly they give you this irregular verb, and it doesn't add up. It doesn't work the same way. And now you're in a state of disequilibrium, and you're like, what do I do? Okay. Well, what happens is the teacher gives you a scheme for that. The teacher works through that. You look up in the book, you figure it out. And once you figure it out and you have a new scheme for how to conjugate this irregular verb, then you go back into a state of equilibrium. Or if the teacher is teaching you how to do an algebra problem, and you're thinking about solving for x, all right, and you've got 27x equals 9, okay, and you're like, 27x equals 9. I need to solve for x. What is x? Now, what do you need to do? You don't know how to do that, so the teacher shows you the problem that you got to divide by 27 in order to get x on its side, on one side all by itself, okay, the numbers on the other side. Well, if you didn't have a scheme for that, you didn't know what to do. So the teacher shows you the process, okay, but at first you were in a state of disequilibrium because you didn't know what to do. The teacher works through the problem. What happens? You create a new scheme. I need to get x by itself on on the other side of the equal sign. So now I've got a scheme in place, and what happens? You're back in a state of equilibrium. That's that process of equilibration. I'm in equilibrium. Teacher throws a curve at me. I'm in a state of disequilibrium. The teacher shows me a new way of doing it, gives me a new scheme, explains it. I look in a book. I go on Google, whatever it is. You figure out that new scheme, and you're like, I got it. Now I know what to do. What happened? You're back in a state of equilibrium. And that's what we do every day. We go through this process. Equilibrium, disequilibrium, back into a state of equilibrium. Now, what is disequilibrium? Disequilibrium is this idea of mental discomfort. Okay? Mental discomfort. Something's not adding up. Something's not working the right way for me. And since it's not working the right way, I don't like that. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I use the example in class. We talk about that tip of the tongue phenomena. Somebody's talking and they say, "Oh, do you remember that teacher we had, or do you remember that celebrity that was in this movie?" And you start talking about it, and you're like, "Oh yeah. What's his name? What's his name? Or what's her name?" And then the teacher or somebody goes, "Oh, skip it. Let's move on." Well, man, sometimes if it's a band that we liked, that we used to listen to, and they're talking about this song, it's like, oh my God, I got to remember that name. I got to remember the song. It's like, what's the name of the song? What's the name of the song? And the person just keeps talking, and all you hear is wah 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 wah, because you're just focusing on What's the name of that song? Okay. What happened was they got you in a state of mental discomfort, that tip of the tongue, and you can't move on until you can remember the name. And suddenly, when you remember the name of the singer or the actor or the song or the date or whatever it is, it's like, oh, that feels so much better now. Now you can go ahead and talk. I'm listening again, right? All right. So what does that mean for us as teachers in our classroom? Now, Piaget talks about our job is to create disequilibrium in the classroom. Our job is to create cognitive conflict. Sometimes you've heard the word cognitive dissonance. Okay, we've got to create a state of mental discomfort, a state of disequilibrium, because that mental discomfort. Piaget talks about how we're naturally curious, how we naturally want to. We don't feel good in a state of disequilibrium. We want to work our way out of it, and so we need to create some disequilibrium. Okay, why do we need to do that? Well, it's in a state of disequilibrium where students have got to make accommodations. They've got to change a scheme, modify a scheme, create a new scheme. And to do that, that's where they get out of from disequilibrium back into equilibrium. Well, where does learning take place? It takes place in accommodation. Well, if learning takes place in accommodation, I've got to make them try to accommodate. I've got to create disequilibrium. Okay. So as a teacher, and I use the example in class, as a teacher, when you're talking to your students about stuff that is overly simplistic and they get it and it's kind of boring, it's below their cognitive level. They're not in a state of disequilibrium. They get it. They understand it. They've already learned this. What do? They just start zoning out. They start doing other things, monkeying around at the table, classroom management problems. It doesn't motivate them. They don't feel a need to listen because they already got it. The same thing is true when you're a teacher and you're talking over their heads. You're using concepts and terms and examples that the students can't relate to whatsoever. You're not creating disequilibrium because they don't even understand what you're talking about. So they just start to zone out. They start to do other things. They want to play on their phone. They want to doodle. They want to talk with their friends. And what we need to do as teachers is we need to kind of create the conditions where the students want to get out of that disequilibrium. Well, that means you have to find the appropriate distance. I use the example of the carrot for the horse. You got to get the carrot not up too close and not 50 yards away. You've got to get the carrot just the right distance where they want to go and pull the cart towards the carrot. So as a teacher, every day as we're making our lessons and we're thinking about new stuff that we're going to create, we have to think, okay, how much is too much? I don't want to overwhelm them. I don't want to make it too easy. I've got to find stuff that's right there in their wheel well, right there in their, where they think they can kind of figure it out. And if they think they can figure it out, they'll be willing to try. The motivation to learn, right? They'll make the accommodations necessary. So that's our job as a teacher from a Piagetian standpoint. We got to create disequilibrium. We got to create the conditions where the students will want to work their way out of that state of disequilibrium. The best thing that I can't do it right now, and I think I might do some things here. I might get a little whiteboard. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But the best thing that you can do, think about this. It's the puzzle books. If you've ever done a word search, you guys know that doing a word search, some of them are really simple. You're trying to find the word, biology, and they've only got 10 letters this way, 10 letters this way, and it goes down. It's pretty easy. You'll find the word biology, right? You guys know what to do. You know the strategies. It doesn't take you long to find these words. But as the number of letters in the puzzle increases, suddenly it gets a little bit more complicated. Okay, it's Sudoku or whatever how you say that. Some of them are really simple. Well, when people have done a bunch of them, they get bored with really easy ones. So you gotta increase the sophistication of the puzzle. Well, that makes the challenge. That's kind of fun. All right? That's what learning is in the classroom. We just got to find the right amount of fun, the right amount of stuff that will challenge the students to think, get them out of their comfort level, out of equilibrium, create a state of disequilibrium, and then give them the tools to get back into a state of equilibrium. That's what we do. That's that constructive nature of learning. That's what Piaget talks about. So,